Library. It's so wonderful to see this many people coming out, sharing a space to hear about local history here in Northampton, and a particularly important local history that we unfortunately haven't heard a lot about before. So also welcome to all our folks watching online on YouTube. This is being streamed online, and a recording of it will be available later. My name is Dylan Gaffney. I work in local history in the archives here at Forbes. A bit of housekeeping before we start. For those of us in-house, the bathrooms are through that doorway, through the arch, across the art gallery and to the left. For those of you at home, you'll have to fend for yourselves. Our friends at Broadside Bookshop are here in the back left corner there selling books. I would encourage you to purchase this book. It's an incredible work of local history, and our copies at the library already have a very long waiting list. So if you want to read it soon, get that, and we'll also have to buy some more. For some background, I grew up in Northampton alongside friends who were the children of some of the island families, including one who's right over there. It's our goal to have more of the people of Northampton see themselves reflected and represented in the archives and local history collection. So it's not just the wealthy, the well-known, the politicians, and the prominent who are part of the Northampton story that future generations will learn about. This little city wouldn't be what it is without the farmers, the immigrants, the everyday people, and the landscapes that make up our neighborhoods. When Jonathan first came to me to talk about this project in its sort of earliest form, I was so excited because it's a subject in a neighborhood I wanted to learn more about, and to get to hear it in people's own voices is truly priceless. So without further ado, I'll introduce our speaker tonight, Jonathan Moldover. Jonathan's a retired physician who moved to the area in 2015 with his wife, Rebecca, and his curiosity and passion for the subject is the reason we're here tonight.
Thank you, Dylan. And Dylan's been really instrumental in getting this project going and coming. And I have to apologize. I'm getting over another respiratory infection, which postponed the first iteration of this. And I'll try to keep my volume up. And I think we need to turn that up more, too. Okay, if people in the back are having trouble hearing me, just wave, and I'll try to speak louder, and I'm hoping I can keep it up for the 45 minutes or 50 minutes of the talk until we get to a question period. Basically, the book itself is the story of the Oxbow, focusing on the time since Thomas Cole's painting, but the book actually starts a lot earlier than that with some of the background. And what I want to focus on tonight, though, because we have limited time, is the community that had developed on the Oxbow. When I first started working on this, I was working with Dylan, getting some of the background history. And then as COVID came to an end, I told him I was planning to walk around and meet some of the people on the island to learn more about the community. And he told me of a oral history project that Forbes was interested in for Oxbow and the Meadows. So I volunteered my wife, and the two of us met people on the island and found ourselves learning about a wonderful community of people who most of had grown up there, raised their families there, had grandchildren there, and just a wonderful community that we wanted to learn more about. And they guided the history that we were accumulating to go with the interviews. What I want to do tonight, though, is focus on the community and two crossings. The first crossing is when the Oxbow crossed the river. It was originally attached to Hadley. Now it's part of Northampton. And that happened in 1840, and we'll talk about that. And the other major crossing that affected life on the island was the crossing of the interstate highway down at Center. That happened in the mid-1960s and really changed life on the island, not for the better. So I'm going to, those are the three topics. There's a lot in the book. About the lumber industry and about the deforestation, many other topics that we're not going to go into at all tonight. There's just not enough time. but the book's available in the corner. Okay. The Thomas Cole was a great landscape artist, was essentially the founder of the Hudson River School, and he passed through Northampton and Hadley in 1833 on his way to Boston, and was told what a great view there was from Mount Holyoke. So he went up for his one and only visit, made sketches of the view, which included the view of the Oxbow that's in the top picture, and a few years later made that painting. We don't have time to go into the history of the iconography of the painting, but it's important to notice that it shows the juxtaposition of the wildness of nature on the left side. That was a very big feature of his work, was wildness of nature, and the very tame, worn down hand-to-man to the right side of the painting. And that combining of the elements made this one of the iconic, if not the iconic image that defined the Hudson River School. Interestingly, it's a picture of the Connecticut River flowing through Massachusetts, which always amuses me. Anyway, when Becca and I moved here about 10 years ago, I was commuting to Springfield at first, and was always puzzled by this giant Oxbow marina off to the side of the highway. And I was familiar with Cole's painting, but couldn't put the two together. I was on the wrong side of the river. There was too much building on it. I sort of forgot about it until after I retired and decided to work on this project to stay sane. Okay. There's not going to be a test on the dates. I just wanted to outline this is the period of time that we'll be talking about in this talk. I just wanted to give you a little outline of the key things going on and roughly give you an idea of the timeline. Thomas Cole was actually born in 1801 in England, and he moved here at the age of 18 with his parents. He died in 1848 from pneumonia complicating a viral infection at the age of 47. He only made one visit to Mount Holyoke in 1833, and 3 years later painted the iconic painting. In 1840 is when the island crossed the river, and we'll talk about that in more detail shortly. For the next 20 years, the island continued to be just farmland, and a lot of the farmers from Hadley continued to farm it, coming over by boat. The first structure on the island was a house built by George Wright, which is still on Island Road. It's 152 Island Road now. And then the first commercial structure was a sawmill in 1872 that was moved down from Vermont. The sawmill was a center of the lumber industry along the Connecticut River until about 1915 when they stopped the log drives, and 1960 when they ran out of lumber. They had built a spin-off pulp industry to make money from the scrap wood and feed the paper industry in Holyoke. And that kept going well beyond when the mill closed, and they brought timber down by rail from Vermont. And that was replaced by a packaging company, a cardboard company that's still in operation on the island. The other end of the period of time we're focusing on is the interstate, and the planning and construction of the highway took place between 1956, when Eisenhower signed the Interstate Highway Act, and 1966, when the building in this area was finished. It was actually open to traffic a year later in 67. Okay. So why did the island cross the river? If why applies to islands, it should, I guess, be how did the island cross the river? This is a map from 1831, before Cole's visit and before the move. And the water, an oxbow is actually the water, defines the water. And if you tilt your head a little to the left, you get an idea that the shape there is like the ox's yoke. And that's what an oxbow is. And they're all over the place along rivers. And they form because of the way water flows around a curve. And over time, they break apart here. Actually, here in Northampton, we have Hulbert's Pond and the Arcadia Sanctuary, which is an ancient oxbow that broke off and started to fill in before this oxbow formed. The land in the middle is usually referred to as an island, even though it's strictly a peninsula. Okay, so people on the oxbow say they live on the island and is surrounded by the bow. Okay, this is connected, as you see, to Hadley. This is Hadley, this is Mount Holyoke, this is the South Hadley line. So this is all clearly Hadley, not Northampton at that point. Okay, this is Mount Nonotuck down here. And that's the Mount Tom water gap, where the two mountain ranges were cut apart. Okay. So this separation of the oxbow and its move across the river is very well documented. It happened on February 25th, 1840. And it's good contemporary documentation in the Hampshire Gazette, which was a weekly newspaper at that time, and also more important in Judd's diaries, Sylvester Judd's diaries, which are housed here at Forbes and have very good descriptions of what happened. Anyway, February in 1840 had been a normal winter before that, with a heavy snowpack up to the north and dense thick layer of ice on the river. There was unusual warming during February that year, and the snowpack started to melt rapidly, and the ice pack on the river started to crack and break up. So you had huge chunks of ice being flowed down on a heavy flow of water. One of those ice flows took off the top of one of the piers of the Northampton Bridge, and those two segments floated along on the blocks of ice and started to plug up the northern loop of the Oxbow. A similar thing happened upriver at Sunderland, where a 100-foot segment was taken off, and that came down as one unit, floating on the ice, and that took out all the rest of the bridge at Northampton. So both bridges were floating on ice and filled up and blocked the northern segment. The damage was about $8,000 to $10,000, which, correcting for inflation, would be $300,000 to $350,000 today. However, when the current Coolidge Bridge was built in 1936, was $1.2 million, and the renovation in 2001 was $32 million. Shows you something about construction prices, which aren't just due to inflation. This is a later map from 1873 after this all happened, and this shows the relative straightening of the river. And this loop, which was 3.4 miles that the boatmen had to travel around, has now been reduced to this segment here. What else about this? Wright's house is on it, and that's now 152 Island Road, and the lumber mill was already documented there in 1873. We have no photographs from 1840, but a very similar pattern happened in the flood of 1936, which happened in March during a sudden warming period. And a very similar process took place with snowpack melting rapidly and ice blocks breaking up suddenly on the river. And this is what probably happened in 1842. 1840 also, these large blocks of ice piling up from the river against the bridges and the dams. And so the northern loop of the Oxbow was blocked, and the water rose across the neck of the Oxbow, and that washed out with the new heavy flow of water. And that was farmland that was very soft, had been plowed regularly. So a new channel was cut relatively straight through. The reporter for the Gazette expressed that this noble stream and her anxiety to reach the deep ocean has shortened her course by about 3.5 miles. So that may be why it crossed the river. We'll see. The new channel was measured at 25 rods, which is just 412 feet, 412 and a half feet. Okay. Sylvester Judd was the editor of the Gazette at that time and for a period until he gave it up and went back to doing his diary. The diaries are here, and they're wonderful to read. He had incredible penmanship, and they're just a pleasure to read along, and he was a good writer. They're being digitized, and they'll be very available in the near future. So anyway, he visited the next day and commented that it makes bad work for the Hockanum and Hadley people, taking away some of their land and reducing the value of all that is cut by the new channel. The Northampton people are almost all rejoicing at the event, which is the effect of their selfishness. So shame on all of us. The other rejoicing was the boatman on the river who was saved 3.5 miles of travel each way. And they had been trying to get that channel cut for years, but the farmers refused to give up their access to the fields. And they were taken care of now. And as the northern channel filled in, you could walk right across, and the island became de facto a part of Northampton. It did not officially become one until 10 years later in 1850 with an act of the legislature, which resolved a fight between Northampton and East Hampton as to who had rights to the island. We won. The community, and this is what I really want to spend more time on. As mentioned, George Wright's house was the first one built. There was a period of time after the pulp mill started spinning off from the sawmill. The mill started to build housing for workers, and they brought in a lot of immigrant labor, mostly from Poland. And there were about 25 to 30 houses, most of them two-family, some boarding houses. And this is mainly to provide housing for the workers, and some of them ended up buying or inheriting the houses from the mill when the mill suddenly went bankrupt and disappeared. Further construction beyond a 25 house or so limit is restricted by the floodplain. And there are a number of residents, including the ones we were interviewing, who grew up there. Their parents and grandparents are the ones who came here originally. They grew up here. They raised their children on the Oxbow. And just a wonderful group of people to talk to and work with. They had a number of common concerns and things they loved about the Oxbow. And the number one thing everyone wanted to talk about was what a wonderful place it was to grow up as a child, and what a wonderful place it was to raise their children. And they all spoke of the complete safety and freedom on the island, and it allowed what is now called in some books a free-range childhood. But they were way ahead of the curve at that point. This is the first house on the Oxbow, Wright's house, and this was a picture taken by the current owner, Czech Guzimski, in 1990 when he first bought the house and before he added a second story to it. But that picture is pretty close to how the house must have looked. Not much had been done to it before Chet got to work on it. And he found a lot of great things in the walls and such as he was doing the building. Obviously, the garage in the back wasn't there originally. The last house built on the Oxbow was the old Mount Tom schoolhouse. This is a brick two-room schoolhouse that was finished in 1915 and operated until 1930. It's now a private residence. The only person left on the island that I know of that actually went there was Stanley Yergolevich, who went there for a week when he was 5 years old until the teacher realized he was too young to be there and sent him home. And no, I couldn't find anyone else who had actually attended school there. What I'm going to do, instead of reading from interviews, since you don't want to hear this voice too much, what's left of it today, Dylan had the idea of using some of the clips from the video we made of the interviews, and that's what I'll be showing you today. This is Andy Peelis and his sister, Mary Klopacki, who were really helpful with this project. And here they're talking about their grandfather coming over.
Right, he came from Poland here, I think, for several years, if I recall, before my grandmother came. And there was 15 in the family. I think 3 of them died. So basically there was 12 living in this home right here.
One died on a boat.
One died, I think, if I recall too, the story from my mother, that one baby died on the boat coming here. So then my grandfather worked at the pup mill. Well, that's what we called it. That's all I know, is the pup mill. And so this home was built for all those who worked at the pup mill at the time, and you ended up with a home.
It was a pulp mill. What we called it pulp mill, but it was actually Toscan Products, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And the company built the homes for the workers and gave
Right.
them
Not every home, right? Not every, but a lot of them that worked. My grandfather definitely. This was home. This is well over 100 years old, this house.
Most of these houses down here were two-family houses.
Right. Right.
You can imagine how some of these big families lived on one side of the house.
12 kids. Can't imagine.
Peter Sharrock's family, grandfather was one of the original ones coming in 1890. We'll hear about it in a minute. Peter didn't grow up on the island. He grew up in Northampton, but then he moved to the island to raise his kids afterwards.
Grandfather, I wrote that down here, came over, I'm thinking it...
Oops, I'm sorry.
Grandfather, I wrote that down here, came over, I'm thinking it was around 1890. He was born in 1868, and he came over here when he was 20 to 25 range. I'm not totally sure.
from Poland.
From Poland. And his name was Frank Zarkowski, Szarkowski. But the paymaster at the mill couldn't pronounce it, so gave him his new name of Frank Sharrock, Sharac. And that's how the name came out. The paymaster at the mill couldn't pronounce his name. So I always used to ask when we were little, why is our name Sharrock and yours isn't? Well, eventually his became Sharrock on the books, but no, that was the story. He said the man just couldn't, so he called him by that, and that was it. He probably don't even think they had social security numbers or any of that at the time. So he came over maybe 1890 rather, and then he built a house over here, that house there, and still worked in the mill, pulp mill. And his wife, my grandmother, came over probably 5 years after he got here. He wanted to build a house, get a job, and then they started their family. And like they said earlier, their first child was born in 1903. That was Philip. And then they went on to have, I think it was 10 total children. That was a small family. My mom's side Haydenville came down from Canada. They had 17.
This is the original Sharrock household that his grandfather built. That's still standing, although it's been changed quite a bit and heavily renovated. And this was an early family portrait of his grandfather with his family. Okay, childhood on the Oxbow, as I mentioned, was the thing most people wanted to talk about and rave about. And I'm just going to go ahead. This is starting with Andy and Mary, and there'll be a few other people speaking after them on the same clip.
Growing up as a child was wonderful. I mean, everybody knew everybody on the street or the other street. It's Ferry Avenue, Island Road. We would go out probably early in the morning and never come home till late in the afternoon. And there was so many kids out. I was the other day thinking about this. I think at one point there was at least 12 to 15 kids on this one street alone, between the Walshes and everybody. And we would just play in the woods. And, we had the woods there before Route 91 came. And so it was all day play. And you could go from house to house. Everybody had their door opened. And I don't know, he was a lot older than I was, so I'm not sure exactly how you did it, but you had a bunch of friends on the other street, right?
Yeah, we had the playground down there, too. Every summer they have a organized playground the city set up, and they would send a playground official to play with the kids and do games, and every once a week they would take us to Look Park swimming.
Yeah, we just bust over to Look Park. It's had a pretty
We just made our own fun. We fished when
you did a lot of that.
We got bored, we just went fishing. We fished a lot. Try to make our own rafts. And because 10, 12 years old, we had a raft on the river. Today, parents would be thrown in jail.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But we just made our own fun.
Yeah.
What are some of the games that you played?
You don't remember, but we played Pigs and Wolves. I'm sure my other neighbors would all remember that. And we'd all gather in the evening to play
Before
that.
TV, we all gathered in the evening.
Oh, yeah.
And we played until dark.
Yeah.
Hide and go seek or something.
Yeah, hide and go seek. Yeah. And then the first mother that would yell out the door, I can still remember this. The first mother would yell, "It's time to come home." And everybody would like, "Ugh." And then everybody would bolt. And that was the end of it. We all went home, doors were shut, and we would wait till the next day or school or whatever. You know, a lot of, when we were kids, everybody used to camp outside too. We'd always have our tents outside in the woods. Because, nobody was going to harm us or anything like that. We'd be having tents out back here, tents out back there.
Tommy Barker and I used to camp out down near the
Always camping out somewhere in the woods. We'd make out little areas, and break it open, and all the kids would get together and chop down little trees and have our little areas where we could camp. And we'd put our tents out there, and 3 or 4 of us, middle of the night, would be out there, 10 years old, 12 years old. Oh, yeah, and our parents used to let us go out there and we'd camp, especially over there. Yeah. I remember being over there, yeah. And then, again, 91 came and we all stopped doing it, Yeah, so that's about it. All I can remember is growing up. It was a good place, a very good place to grow up.
It was a different world, but like I said earlier, they'd be gone. The kids would go out and play baseball, or they'd do something out in the woods, or they'd be down fishing. And we knew where they were if they went to the river. They knew that was, and we wouldn't let them on the river when the ice first started. They learned how to react around water and ice and so forth, but they pretty much had to reign the whole place. They could come and go where they wanted. There really wasn't, especially in the wintertime, there's very little traffic down here. The marina just maybe has some boat sales or something, but very, very minor. So the kids back then, like I said, they'd go off, wandering off, doing their own thing. And they never went up to Northampton. It seems like they were content here.
Like I said, I don't know that I repeated this, but coming home when the water was up to Route 5, I told my friend I'd never live here if they paid me. Then I met my husband, and here I am. He called this, I think, the 8th wonder of the world. He brought me here. So, and it is. It's a great place. And like I said, we have many happy memories. The kids, Halloween, the kids would all get together, and the older kids would make a party for the younger kids. We had one in our garage one year, and it just was a community where you felt safe. And it was a great place to bring kids up. It was easy because there was no place they could get in trouble.
As Andy said, fishing at the Oxbow has always been a hobby for everybody there. Now, in addition to some of these other farm issues, the commercial farming that had been there originally got pushed to the periphery and didn't last that long. But all of the families living on the island had their own personal farm lots, and they would be growing vegetables themselves to use over the summer and to can for the winter. This was stopped after Route 91 came through, which eliminated their access to that part of the island, and the marina bought up all that land. But until then, this was a major occupation there as a side gig.
I think everybody had some kind of a farm down here when growing up, and then once not. And I remember when years ago when the asparagus field, we used to go through a wooded area. I can remember driving through a very wooded area to get to the asparagus field. And then once 90 came, it was just a road that you just went there, But everybody had a farm down here. Everybody did. That was secondary to your job or whatever, and some were probably just farmers.
Every person here had a lot till 91 came. We had a lot too, like Mr. Yergolevitz has. They had theirs was down there, and then when 91 came, they bought Mr. Krukowski's. There was Mr. Krukowski's, then there was Mr. Switowski that lived next to Mr. Yergolevitz, and then we had a lot, and then the Pelises, her mom and dad, with Mary's grandparents. So everybody had a lot. So everybody farmed. Yeah. So it was a very farming area. And then 91 came. We had an apple orchard back here. I think it belonged to Mr. Maciejewski, because he had land behind here, and it was all apples. It was beautiful in the spring. And then Mr. Underwood's land started from there onward, and corn was his main thing, but he did sell and do everything. But like I said, he brought in ladybugs, and our houses would be covered in them.
Well, we still had a cow. I used to have to do the chores and help my mother, bring wood in the wood box and stuff like that, because we burned wood in those days. We always had these little chores to do. We had chickens here. We used these garages out here. I built all of them myself. I tore all the barns down and everything and built them. But at one time we had chickens, pigs, the whole 9 yards of a little farm had. But in those days, the neighbors didn't mean nothing. Everybody had some sort of animals.
They used to can everything.
Yeah.
Any vegetables.
Yeah.
And my father had a place way in the back of the cellar that they used to store all the canned stuff.
Mm.
It was like a little carved underneath the back porch.
Underneath the back porch.
It was years when they were going to cement that cellar that they were digging out for the floor, that he came across a can of string beans that were probably there for 30 years.
Mm.
And he opened it up and they were still good.
Yeah.
Most of these family farms were just, kitchen gardens for the individual families. But Stanley Yergolevich had some additional land, and he grew asparagus commercially in addition to his private farm. And he had most of the kids and many of the adults on the island work for him over the years.
Hugo Levis was the one gentleman that everybody worked, especially on this road. We all took turns from
Get up
8 years
at 5,
on.
go pick asparagus at 5:30.
Mine was the
You
afternoon
go to
shift.
school and stay awake.
Yeah. Yep. But we made a couple dollars from him every, week, and
Not a lot, but
no, it was
Like
enough to
dinner,
get us to go
it
get
was
candy
enough for us.
on the street. Yeah.
Well, I inherited land. I had asparagus. And I had, in those days, we used to send all our stuff to Boston. There was a commission merchant. And they would pay us a certain percentage for selling our asparagus. Then I sold some locally. Then Mr. Underwood, he had a big farm out here. He would buy some for his stand that was up on East Street. And he would buy a couple cases a day for me. And, I got rid of it. I didn't have no trouble. The only thing, when you send it to Boston, they had to get a commission. So that took away your profit and stuff like that. And I had to buy the boxes and pizzas and Hadley, so there was another little expense. So from the beginning, we weren't making too much money, but being stubborn kept at it. Then as I planted more, I had shipping more. Sometimes during the summer, the spring, when it was real good, I'd ship 10, 20 cases a day. So that brought my income up a little bit more.
Mary and Andy had memories of picking asparagus and bundling it in your...
Yeah, oh yeah. Sometimes we'd be out there till 11 o'clock at night, because we would size it and the woman would bundle it and cut it and put rubber bands on it and stuff like that, Nowadays, asparagus is like field grown. We used to bunch it in 3 different categories. Firsts, nice ones as big as your thumb or your finger, and then thins, which separate the thins, and then we sell the crooks any old which way, and they'd be a lot cheaper, but they taste the same, so a lot of the locals would buy the skinnies and the crooks, and we'd ship mostly the first to Boston. But that's about the farming. I did raise corn one year, but I busted on that guy from same person that was buying my corn, he said, the market is so flooded, don't even bother sending us any more corn. So I let it grow out, and I don't know what I did with it.
Flooding is an important fact in life on the Oxbow and determines a lot of things that go on and has influenced it over the years. And there are really two kinds. There's the normal light, fresh spring freshets. These are the light floods that occur with the snow melt to the north. And they're very important for the farmers. That grayish dust you see is a fine gray silt that's deposited by the freshet. And over the millennia, that's deposited a total of about 4 feet of rich loam, a little bit at a time each year. With some of the climate changes they're seeing, it's not happening every year anymore because there isn't an adequate snow mass over the winter, and that may be a problem down the line. But meanwhile, this is what's kept the Connecticut River meadows as among the richest farmland in the country. Not unlike the Nile. These usually are just a minor nuisance. Sometimes Route 5 gets blocked and people can't get out to work or school for a day or two and take a little vacation, but they're not really a real problem. Occasionally there are more major floods. In the last century, the biggest one, actually the deepest flood since colonial times was 1936. And that was another winter, late winter, I guess, flood happened in March, similar to the February flood in 1840, and that there had been a severe winter with a deep snowpack, and that was still on the ground and thick ice on the river, and there was heavy rain, and the temperature went up to the 50s and 60s for an extended period. So there was that massive snow melting and the ice breaking up. You saw the picture earlier of the ice flows against the bridge. And it finally peaked at about 30 feet above the normal level. Stanley is the only one left on the Oxbow who remembers the flood of 36, and we'll hear it from him.
In 1938, there was a foot of water on this floor. In 1936, there was a foot from the ceiling. My father and mother, they lost a cow and a horse. My father was working at the mill and he couldn't leave there. My mother was here with, 2 or 3 kids, and the animals were in the barn. She didn't know that the water was coming up that fast, and they both drowned, the animals.
And what happened to all of you here when the water went so high?
Oh, the city came with a boat. I remember a boat coming to the porch over here. And it must have been a police or fire department. I don't know who it was. I was, 4 or 5 years old, you know?
Right.
So, they saved us. We could have went upstairs. It isn't like what's happening in Kentucky nowadays, One thing about here, we're in the backwater. So no matter what, all you have to go is a little higher. There's no current here or anything like that to sweep this house off the map per se.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving. I'm not going to spend much time on the 1938 hurricane and flood. 2 years later, that was the most destructive storm to hit New England in modern times and caused the most damage and deaths. There were about 700 deaths in New England from that storm. There was one in Northampton. And I'm going to skip over that to get back on schedule. The 1984 flood was an unusual one and was very significant on the Oxbow. Are you hearing me in back still? Okay, thank you. This is what happened. This was Memorial Day weekend. This flood occurred, and there had been very heavy rains, and the river was running high. Because it was a holiday weekend, they had left the floodgates open on the feeder streams up in Vermont, and they didn't want to close them because there were already campers there who they didn't think would be able to escape in time if they let the water back up. So the river was getting even higher, and that was complicated by a big error at a private power plant in White River Junction, who had built their dam up an extra 10 feet with a wooden dam to get more water for more power production. And they realized that that was going to give way under this load. So late at night, they told the night watchman to pull the plug. And it was literally like a giant bathtub plug at the base of the dam. And the kid pulled the chain, and so it was like a jet engine, and that was the end of it. And it drained the reservoir in a few hours. The first word people on the Oxbow heard about it, Andy describes remembering the police coming and pounding on all the doors at 1 in the morning and told them that there's a 20-foot wall of water coming down the river, and they had less than an hour to get to safety. This is what it looked like afterwards. You can see the marina is covered up to the base of the building on the marina, which is, I think, about 30 feet up. You can see that the interstate was built up to be above the 100-year snow plain. It's up 30-odd feet, and that wasn't covered. But the Ferry Avenue and Island Avenue homes are there, completely surrounded by water. Teresa Lipsky remembered being trapped in her house, and Mick Duder, who owns the marina, came in one of his pontoon boats, rescued her, and took her up Route 5 to Atwood Drive on his pontoon boat, and he could go all the way up to Atwood by boat at that time. As you mentioned too, though this is usually a backwater without much current, the rush of water from this moved a 1,000-pound step in front of Peter Sharrock's house 200 yards with the force of the water that was hitting them. We're still seeing recent floods. There was obviously a lot of remediation work with diversion dams up north and the dikes around Northampton after the 30s with the Corps of Engineers. But we still see them. This one, most of you remember this one just a couple years ago in July of 2023 when there was millions of dollars of crop damage. This is Skip Pepin's cornfield on the north side of the island, and the water is up to almost the top of the corn stalks. He lost his whole crop. This is the marina at that time where this water is supposed to be on the other side of the docks. Okay. Want to go into the second crossing. One of the main changes. Life was doing pretty well for a couple of generations on the Oxbow until two things happened. And the first major one was Route 91. And that was really a problem, and I want to talk about that a little bit, how that happened. Remember, Eisenhower was into interstate highways. It was a good thing in most ways. And anyway, he signed that in 1956, and the planning went on for about a decade. Route 91 was envisioned as a replacement for Route 5, going along the river on the west side from New Haven to the Canadian border, as it does. The original plan, and there were a number of plans, I call it Plan A, Plan B, and the one that was actually used. And Plan A was proposed by the Automobile Club, and they had a route going down the west side of the city, then angling into the west side of Mount Tom Range and going down East Street in East Hampton. Would have bypassed the Oxbow altogether. East Hampton was thrilled. They were supposed to get an exit ramp, and they thought they would become a commuting center, having access to the interstate. Didn't happen, but they were excited for a while. Plan B was proposed a year later by the State Highway Department, and they were following Route 5, as it was originally supposed to, following along Route 5 on one side of the railroad tracks, and on the east side of was the old pulp mill, which at this point had gone bankrupt. Oskin went bankrupt in a huge stock scandal by Lowell Barrel that bankrupted 20 companies, and that pulp mill closed overnight. It's a great story. It's in the book. We don't have time to go into it, though. At this time, in 57 to 59, a cardboard company from Troy had said they would take it over. And the mayor was worried that this would crowd them and said, well, and he wanted to speak to the highway department about an alternative. The owners of the plant in all their public hearings said, we don't care, do plan A or plan B, we can live with either one, just make a decision already so we can move ahead. Meanwhile, there was a meeting in Boston. No one knows what was said. I tried to get the minutes through the Freedom of Information Act and was told that the records had been destroyed because they were more than 25 years old and no one was interested. Let me go back. I'm sorry. Let me go back to that. So anyway, the Gazette had reported that this plan was now being proposed where the interstate would sweep down across East Street. It took out 12 homes that would be demolished on East Street in East Hampton and cross the Oxbow behind Ferry Avenue, behind everyone's backyards on Ferry Avenue, cross back over the meadow and join up at Atwood Drive with the rest of the interstate. And this is, of course, roughly what it's done and what it's like today. That had not been proposed at all during the previous almost 10 years. There was a public meeting that was supposed to announce it. In February, the highway commissioner or associate commissioner showed up. Before that, there was a big issue here. Let me go back because this is important. This is the northern loop of the Oxbow. When their plan was for the highway crossing, there would be a solid causeway, not a bridge. And there would be a 2-foot underwater culvert to equalize water pressure and water levels. But everyone was objecting, A, because of stagnation in this segment, and because there was a marina here. The original Oxbow Marina was here. It was built by Ted Glazewski, who lived in the house on the corner of Island Road and Route 5, and he had a gas station there and a convenience store. And over the years, he dug out, he built a beach there, he built a marina, and did boat rentals, and the boats could go around the loop and get into the Connecticut River. And everyone was all up in arms that he'd be put out of business, that there'd be stagnant water here. The city fought it. The county fought it. All the consultants recommended against it. They had thousands and thousands of signatures on petitions. The Isaac Walton Society, the fishing association, had made a big thing and offered to help build a bridge to keep the other side open. February of '64, the highway department showed up to discuss it, and they stood up and the meeting started with saying, well, there's no discussion, its decision is made, and this is what we're doing. Live with it, essentially. And that they were forming a committee so it wouldn't happen again. It wasn't clear if what wouldn't happen would be an ecological disaster. What wouldn't happen would be people were objecting to their plans. But either way, it didn't happen. The people had sued to do a 20-foot square culvert, and that would have allowed small boats through. Anyway, it was, they said it was going to be built solid with a 2-foot underwater culvert, and that's what we have now. Glazewski's Marina and Oxbow service area were put out of business. As soon as construction started on the highway, had to shut down the marina. And then when the highway opened 2 years later, he had to shut down the gas station because all the traffic had been diverted onto the interstate. They had a lot of support, and both at the city and the county level, people were working for them, and the state just walked right over it. This is what his service area was like. And this is a clip from the Springfield Republican from '62. It's the best I could do with the picture. I just want to show it because even back then, it was this is called the New Oxbow Marina then, and it was known as a beautiful place for picnicking. It was very popular, and that was totally lost. This is what the causeway actually looks like now, looking down from Mount Holyoke. It's solid. There's a little culvert underneath it. There's also a culvert under Route 5 that connects the other end of the loop to the Connecticut River. Also about a 2-foot culvert. So the water level is equalized, and when the river floods, this segment rises up and floods over the cornfield there. just to give you some idea what's left, this is similar to the maps you saw, but this is what we can do now with a satellite image. So this is the shape of the river now, the Oxbow, the channel left open here. What I wanted to show a couple of things in this. Look at this segment here. When they took out land for the fill, they had permission to dig out this wedge here. And all that was dug out completely, and that's what provided the fill base that elevates the highway 30-odd feet above ground level. And what happened after that, for a few years, the kids on the island had a wonderful time. That was their private little lake there. They had boats. Stanley Yukelevich had a power boat and taught all the kids how to water ski. And then gradually people outside the area started coming in, and it became a site for drugs, nude bathing, and things began to deteriorate to a point where there was a murder of a Smith student there on the site, which got people very alarmed and upset. Before that happened, this Oxbow Marina had been closed. Across the Oxbow here, where there's, I don't know if some of you know, there's the water ski team headquarters across the Oxbow, just off, I think it's Northampton Road there by the fields. That was the second Oxbow Marina that was built by Mick Duder, and he had it there for about 10 years. Then after the murder and all the uproar there, he had the idea of moving his marina across and using this wedge of a cove as an enlarged marina, which is what he ended up doing. It took years to get approval. There was a lot of community opposition because the only road in is Island Road, which is very narrow and windy and no way to expand it. But in the end, the community lost that fight, and the marina was built. It was originally 25 boats. It's now 500 boats are docked there. That's the largest marina on the Connecticut River, and the largest one between Canada and the Long Island Sound. We'll talk about that a little more later. But you see, the other thing I want to show you on this is how the highway doesn't cut it in half. The big section here is the marina. This is their fields that used to be the community farms that the marina had let soccer teams and now Frisbee teams use. This is a farm field that he rents out to a Connecticut farmer. So the rest of the activity is pushed to the smaller side. This whole thing is just shy of 300 acres. The wedge is 40 acres by itself. That's the cardboard plant, and they have a cornfield they rent to Skip Pepin here. So this slice is that. Skip's other field that he owns is here. So this little wedge here along Island Road and Ferry Avenue, maybe you think of that as a triangle, right? It's probably about 20, 25 acres, and as the community has been compressed into that, rather than the whole 300-acre island they were running free on before. What else? I'm not going to talk about the marinas at all. We just don't have time. There's a good story, a separate chapter. I just want to show this. Everyone thinks the Oxbow Marina as Mick Duda's project. Actually, the Glazewski's Marina was the Oxbow Marina until it shut down. Mick and his brother made the next Oxbow Marina. They're always using the same name in '66. Then he and his brother separated, and his brother Raymond took over the farming operation, and Mick kept the marina. After all the trouble that was developing on the wedge site, the cove on the Oxbow side, on the island side, he finally built the current marina in 1976. And that's when you see it was supposed to be a small for a few boats, and within a few years was up to 500. The Glazewskis were very upset that he kept the same name because their old customers kept thinking that was the new one was their marina, and they felt especially hurt by that. The road, I-91, this is Ferry Avenue, this is Teresa's house, and this is Island Road going under the interstate. The interstate is going down through the backyards of the Ferry Avenue homes. We'll talk about that a bit more in a sec. Okay, so I'm really sorry that my voice isn't holding up better. This is Andy and Mary talking about the noise pollution and some of the other changes from the interstate. I'm going to play that next.
We took a ride with Mrs. Lipsky and her family, and all the kids on the street, we got up on top of 91 and rode our bikes to Holyoke, to the golf course, and then came back. And then I think the week later is when it started. And I remember feeling so sad because the noise was just outrageous. Because growing up, all you could hear at night was crickets. I can still remember that so vividly, crickets. The window was
bats and fireflies.
Yeah, fireflies. We
at night there'd be
big
bats
jars
flying all over.
Yeah.
And the fireflies were just a million of them.
Collect them in jars. We'd run in the backyard and collect them all.
Slowly, I don't know if the noise made it go away. You could walk through those asparagus fields or cornfields. There were a million pheasants, wild pheasants. I can remember one time coming up from the Brooks Pond and looking out into that field. There had to have been 50 of them. Roosters, all different colors. And you could walk down there now for the last 30 years and not see one pheasant.
I have to say 91 is worse for me than the marina because of the noise. It's extremely noisy down here.
Yeah, see, and I can sit in the backyard, I can hear it, but it doesn't bother me.
You know, I think that's what happens. It's like I'll be gardening or, like I say, in the garden back there, I don't hear it. But if I stop and I just sit there, I hear it. And it's funny because, like, I'll go to bed and I'll open up the window, I hear it. And it can be really loud, but then all of a sudden it's like, it lulls me to sleep. I guess you get so used to being down here that like I say, my mother tried for years to get barriers put up. She had officials down here. She had the mayor down here. And it never, ever happened. She used to say to us, I'm going to have it done before I die. And it never happened.
And do you know what reason that?
Well, they had the mayor down here. We had...
no reason. I don't think it was...
They just said Massachusetts doesn't do it. Connecticut puts up the walls, but not Massachusetts. And we used to say the noise factor down here is so difficult. And it's difficult to sell a home.
I'm not going to go into the marina at all beyond what I said already. That was the other major thing that changed life on the island. There are a lot of great stories about it, but you have to see it in the book. Why not just summarize here? Cole, in that letter I quoted at the beginning, wanted to document the natural changes of landscape and those affected by man. And just to summarize what has happened since his time. The natural changes obviously include the migration of the island, which is a natural process that all oxbows do eventually. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess depends which side of the river you're farming on. The other natural element is, of course, the floods. The freshets, the little spring freshets with their refreshing the layer of silt is a great thing. And it's made that 4 feet of loam some of the most valuable farming land around. Obviously, the more major floods aren't. And the flood mitigation over the years, especially after the 1930s, when the Corps of Engineers took over, has helped limit the risk, but not eliminate it completely. And we're still getting significant floods. It's hard to tell what's going to happen in the future with climate change. We don't have the big snowpacks melting, but we have heavier rainstorms and with more power and more water. So we will see. There's been much better internet warnings and such about the rising water. Hopefully those federal systems will be kept in place. Okay, the affected by man, the thing that bothered Cole the most and one of his big sorrows in life was the amount of deforestation going on in the mid-1800s, both in his Catskills and around here. And in the picture, in the painting, you see how the clear cutting on was the mountain and back with the strips of cutting is Pomeroy Mountain in Southampton. And you can see, and the rest of the level land has been denuded for farmland. Since then, because of the change in the industrial activity and change in the need for lumber, and as well as conscious conservation efforts both on a local and state level. There's been regrowth, as you see in this picture, that the Pomeroy Mountain there is pretty well greened up, as a lot of the land around here. If you look at the Google satellite map of northern Vermont and New Hampshire, you can see there's been great reforestation there too, where the forests had been stripped to float logs down to the Oxbow sawmills. So that's a positive. I think Cole would be happy to see that. The polluting lumber and pulp industries have been replaced by a relatively clean, electrically powered cardboard factory. It's probably good. The marina has mostly negatively impacted quality of life with the traffic and littering and loss of the farmland. On the other hand, most of the people, everyone I've spoken to, while bemoaning that, raves about how nice Mick Duder is and what a great family he is and how much they respect him and what he's done there. And they're able to separate what it's done to them from them actually liking him and the family and the business he's created there, and they respect him a lot and seem to have a lot of honest affection towards him, unless they fooled me, which is possible. So anyway, we have a community, I want to wrap this up, which has survived about 4 generations so far, staying a close-knit community with mutual aid on child care and everything else going on the island. They fought various threats, both in terms of the flooding, in terms of the highway coming, the marina coming. They fought as best they could. And when they lost the fights, they displayed an amazing resilience to keep going, accepting what could not be changed with a great deal of grace. And just a nice group of people to get to know. And I've run a bit over, as usual. Do we have time for questions or not?
Yeah, we definitely have time for questions. And I have a mic. If anybody wants to ask a question, please raise your hand. Thank you, Jonathan. So, as I was saying, I'll run out to you with a mic, like Phil Donahue style, for those of us of a certain age. And feel free, but otherwise, thanks for coming out, and thank you, Jonathan. That was amazing. Oh, you do for the live stream.
Oh, okay. So I live on 4th Street, and so I often walk down there. And the last couple of summers, the levels of the floods have been unbelievably high. And the houses that were never flooded before down along 4th Street are now, their entire basements are full of water. So it's a little unnerving to think if there's more flooding, you know, what's going to happen to all the people that live down at the bottom of the hill.
I don't have the answer there. You know, it is a problem. The flooding is continuing. A lot of the worst has been helped. Well, a lot of the changes made in the 30s were based on the flooding being generated by the great snowpacks up in Vermont and New Hampshire, melting and flooding down. So a lot of it was built around making dams on the feeder streams that feed into the Connecticut River to hold back that water and feed it out slowly. And now that's not really what's causing the flooding, and it's a whole new pattern. Good luck on finding federal help and redesigning the program. Hi, Barbara.
It's a great presentation.
No,
Enjoyed this very much. I do have a question about Ferry Avenue. Was there ever a ferry?
No. Well, not on Ferry Avenue there wasn't. There was Smith's Ferry before. When the Oxbow was the original configuration, there was a ferry that went from Northampton to Hadley. I think that was Smith's Ferry. But I don't know if I don't think it has anything to do with the name. Mary, do you know if? No idea why it's Ferry Avenue. There was a move to make it Peelis Avenue, since there were 5 or 6 of the houses were owned by the Peelis family, but somehow it ended up Ferry Avenue. It's probably decided in Boston. the books. I'm happy to sign any and ruin them for you if you like.
My grandparents owned the land that was to the left of, or the right of the Oxbow, going up Route 5 between the Oxbow and Atwood Airport. And they had 40 acres there, which they farmed. And in the hurricane of 38, they had a cow barn there, and it was actually lifted off of its foundation and turned around 90 degrees and set back down. But I can tell you a lot more stories about some of the floods there and have pictures of them too.
The 38 flood and hurricane was really horrendous for New England. Northampton and Western Mass didn't get the worst of it because the way the eye of the storm went up the east side of New England, and the way the wind circulates around hurricanes in the northern hemisphere, we had the back of the wind here. But it was enough. In an hour, 3,000 trees were knocked down in Northampton. A lot of them at Smith and Look Park and Charles Park. Roofs were taken off houses. Smith had a lot of damage. The shop windows were blown out on Main Street. So though we got the easy side of the hurricane of 38, it did an incredible amount of damage. The Prospect House on top of Mount Holyoke, which was built back in 1851 after Cole's time, had a big addition put on as a hotel, and that was blown down in the hurricane of 38. And prior to that, there'd been an addition that burned down. And what's left is the original building that was built in 1851. Still there. It was constructed in 3 weeks by a crew of 20 men. And it was only held to the mountain by one bolt. And that's still standing. That survived 38. It survived the fire. And it's a good view. It's the closest. This picture is from the second floor terrace there, which is about as close to the angle that Cole imagined. He was at ground level. There was no building there when he was here. The building was built after he died. But that's about as high as you can get now. There is one balcony higher up, but that's off limits to the public. And it's quite unsafe at this point. So that's about as close. But he imagined a higher perspective. He said he felt free to correct God's mistakes. That was one of his famous quotes. So actually, you can't reproduce the painting in a photograph. So maybe a helicopter or a drone. Anyone else? Okay. They want us out by 8.
What was that?
They want us out by 8 o'clock.
I mean, yeah, but this is fun. These are the good nights. I just want to thank the families and the folks from the neighborhood who came out. It's really special to have you all here. And most of all, thank you, Jonathan, for an incredible presentation, incredible